Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Opapari, and this is the Songwriters on Process podcast. Since 2010, I've been interviewing songwriters about their writing process. And on this podcast, we go deep, deep, deep into the writing process, far deeper than the usual. Do you start with the lyrics or the music question? By way of background, I have a PhD in English literature, and I'm a prose writer myself. I'm not a songwriter. In fact, I've never written a song in my life. But my goal has always been to treat songwriters the same way that we treat prose writers and poets, just as writers, plain and simple. And I've always been interested in the writing process. This is an intelligent conversation between two writers. And on this podcast, like I said, we go deep into the process. We talk about rituals, the seeds of inspiration, the role of movement on the process, writer's block, the revision process, pens, pencils, types of paper, and of course, we talk about books. You can find all the archived interviews on the Songwriters on Podcast website and across all streaming platforms. And with that, let's dive into this week's episode. And today on the podcast, we have Sophie Allison, aka Soccer Mommy. I am a huge, huge Soccer Mommy fan, really, since her debut a few years ago. So I've been looking forward to this for years. She's one of those artists where, I'll hear a really good song for the first time and don't know who it is. And I look and I see, oh, that's Soccer Mommy. Makes sense. Or she's one of those artists where I said, okay, new song by Soccer Mommy is out. I got to listen to it. And she's never let me down. I'm just such a huge fan. And I think it's one of those artists where you just go, okay, I'm just going to listen to everything because I know it's going to be good. I know that sounds like hyperbole, but I'm a big fan. So Soccer Mommy's latest album is out now. It is called Evergreen. Of course, it's great. My one takeaway from this interview with her is I don't want to say that the writing process is effortless because I don't think it ever is for any artist, but she doesn't have trouble writing. She doesn't want for lack of material. Um, and whether there's things she wants to write about, she's always inspired. I didn't get the sense that she was waking up every morning wondering what she was going to write about. She just creates every day, and so I don't think it's something that she seems to. We're getting started. Getting started is a real struggle. I don't mean to say that the writing isn't a struggle, but it's not hard to get started. So anyway, the new album Evergreen is out now by Soccer Mommy. It is great, of course, so give it a listen. But first, here is my podcast interview with Sophie Allison, Soccer Mommy. So I want to start with this, and I'm actually want to read a couple of quotes I have. I like to quote writers to songwriters and get your reaction to them. And one of the things that strikes me, this Joan Didion quote, she says, "The impulse to write things down is a compulsive one." So how often do you get the urge, like, to write? Not, oh, I should be writing, or I'm an artist, I'm supposed to write. How often do you get the urge, like that drive, feeling like I have to write?
A lot, most days. Honestly, I never schedule time to write. I never sit down and say, I've got to work on some music. I've honestly never gotten to the point with writing an album where I was on like running up against like kind of a timeline where I was like, I really haven't, gotten any work done and I need to like start cracking on this. But really most days, I mean, I was writing seconds before being on this call. And yeah, it's kind of something I've been doing since I was like 5 years old. So I completely agree with that quote. It is like just compulsive rather than something where you are like, I need to sit down and work on this in a logical way, I guess.
So it's funny you say that because running up against the time that we were supposed to have this interview, I find that what helps me to write are false deadlines. So a false deadline, when I was a professor, I would tell my students this, if you say write for an hour and there's no need to stop after that hour, I'm not going to get a lot done. But if you say to me, you got 60 minutes to write because in an hour we're going to go somewhere. Like if, my wife and I have plans, I'll always get more done because of that false deadline. And I think that's why I'm so, I guess I can write a lot when I'm on airplanes or on trains because at some point I've got to put my laptop away. So, I guess, do you write well under those types of deadlines then?
Yeah, honestly, I think I've never set deadlines for myself in basically anything I've ever done. It's a bad habit. I'm a bit of a procrastinator anyway. But I do write well when traveling and when in those kind of situations, like for example, on tour, you've got this chunk of time between sound check and playing the show or sound check and dinner or after the show before you're loading out. You've got these like little periods of time where you can actually work. And if you don't take those, you just don't, it doesn't matter if you have the urge to do it, you don't have time. You're just busy doing other stuff. So I find that if I'm in a creative zone, it's totally easy for me to like lock in if I have that like specific period of time where I can like kind of disappear into it and like need to get the stuff that I need to do done. I think when there's, yeah, like a ton of time, I can be easily distracted if I'm not like hyper focused on an idea that I'm excited about.
But I think that goes back to why procrastination can be effective. I mean, teachers always tell students procrastination is a dirty word, right? You can't procrastinate. But I think the strength of that is that people, write best if under those pressures. So when you say procrastinate, I don't know, I hear that as, oh, that's a part of your process that makes it work because you write best under pressure and with those small chunks of time.
Yeah, I think honestly, I can do things whenever if I'm given the ability to like focus on something if I'm excited about it. Like whether if it's a song that I'm really in the groove with and wanting to finish and wanting to work on, I'll find any second of time that I want to work on it. And if I'm just not feeling very inspired, I am not going to do anything at all.
So do you write in some fashion every day, whether it's songwriting, journal writing? Is that just naturally a part of your day?
Yeah, I try. I don't necessarily write every single day. I would say most days I'm trying, I'm just casually trying to write stuff like playing guitar and looking for ideas. I never really write anything down, honestly, which is probably not the best, but I think my mindset on it is trying to put things like words onto paper and work with them that way is for singing is more difficult for me because you don't get that like cadence that works with the melody. And I think all of those things going together is very important. And I also think if I come up with an idea and I have to go do something else and I forget about it, then it wasn't that great. So I should probably just keep working on something else.
Yeah, that's often what I hear, that if it's meant to be, it'll
Mhm.
stick around.
Yeah, you
Um,
won't forget it.
yeah. So you mentioned paper, and I've always said I can do a whole website dedicated just to the types of pens and the types of paper that songwriters, I mean, the loyalty that songwriters have to those things. So first of all, when it comes to lyrics, are you a pen and paper person or a computer person?
I guess computer or phone, but I usually don't write them down until the song is like completely done. It's usually more of something that I write it down for the purpose of like later when we need it for the album, I have it at least written down partially. But I don't usually write them down. I kind of keep it all up in my head.
All right. So I had Tracy Campbell of Camera Obscura on about a month ago, and she said kind of, I think what you're saying, and I couldn't believe she said this because it's an incredible talent, but that she doesn't even write the songs down until they're complete in her head. So somehow she's able to memorize all the lyrics, and she won't even commit them to paper until they're fully formed in her head. I was like, so let me get this straight. You're memorizing all the lines. So is that kind of what you're doing or no?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think for me too, I would much rather when a song is like done and I've kind of got at least most of the structure of it where I can play it through and everything. I'd rather just demo it really quick and have a really basic demo. Um, I don't know. I find, for one, I think when I'm writing, like I said, working on editing lyrics in any sense on paper, it like can lose a certain cadence and naturalness that I think it needs, just for me personally. And then once I have it done, it's all in my brain. I just don't have any reason to sit there and like type out all the lyrics. It's just so boring.
Okay, so I just want to get this straight because I'm fascinated by this. So the lyrics come to you, right? You're thinking, and then so when they do come to you, you're kind of going through them in your head. But then when it finally comes time to commit them, they don't go, they're on a computer. They're not on a pen and paper, right?
Yeah, computer or phone, I would say it's really just a way to like have it ready to email later when somebody needs the lyrics. But yeah, it definitely all kind of stays up here. I don't know, it's just like any like knowing the words to like a pop song or something, you know, you just kind of know them at a certain point with the melody that you have, and it all feels just really natural to remember them.
So when you edit then, uh, I'm a prose writer, not a songwriter, but I have certain editing tricks when it comes to revising. For example, like I never write and revise in the same place. To me, distance is paramount. So if I'm writing in this chair, I'll revise somewhere else. Um, I've also found that distance, I mean, any kind of temporal distance helps too, not just the spatial distance. But so those techniques I have. Are there certain techniques, I guess, when it comes to lyric writing, editing, that you use that are effective?
Honestly, I think most of the time it's like I want to get a really good base of you know, melodic and lyrical ideas to feel like a song is like ready for me to just even get into the part of my brain that's, you know, picking it apart a little bit. And usually it's really just me in my day-to-day life thinking about the ideas that I have for a song and the lyric ideas, and maybe there's placeholders in it at certain points that I'm just using until I find something better, and thinking about those lyrics I don't like or that I do like, and just kind of trying to get more inspiration and think about what I'm really trying to say. I guess a lot of times when I start a song, it's like kind of aimless. And it's just me working off a melodic idea and where the lyrics are leading me. And then I try to spend my time thinking about that idea a lot so that I can come up with, I guess, like deeper inspiration for what I actually want to say and what things are important to say. And then when I'm just sitting around playing guitar and writing all the time, I can tweak as I see fit. Kind of.
So are those things separate? Um, the lyric writing, I mean, again, I'm just basing this on what songwriters tell me, that sometimes they'll have a melody over here, lyrics over here, and they don't realize it at the time because maybe they did them at separate times. But they go, oh, that mix and match, that kind of, oh, actually that melody goes with those lyrics. So how often does it happen to you then?
Almost never. I really don't like to write lyrics fully separately. Like obviously you could edit lyrics without the music, but I don't like to write lyrics without the melody. I just find that leads to trying to fit lines into lines of melody that don't necessarily match or the cadence doesn't match. And I think a lot of my melodic writing is based on just the way that I naturally sing, which is not very proper. So I think having having the lyrics work with that is really important to me. But I will sometimes like if I have a song mostly done and there's like a couple lyrics I don't really like, just be thinking about it a lot and kind of tweaking in my own mind, like singing it in my head a little bit, looking for something that fits a little bit better. But usually most of it is done sitting with the guitar.
Okay, now I'm going to get very specific here, only because I'm fascinated by these, like the very tiny parts of the process. So you said sitting, and again, there I've heard many things. So literally, people are sitting. Sometimes they're standing with that guitar, other times they're walking around. Um, so do you do all of those things, or is there a preferred way when you have that guitar and you're creating?
I think it's usually sitting. I think just because I probably wouldn't be walking around at home. I do a lot of acoustic guitar, and I don't even have a strap on my acoustic, so obviously sitting. But I also think just when I'm traveling and or on tour or just wherever, I can write even if people are around as long as I can feel some sort of like nobody's looking at me type of feeling, like people are just everybody ignore me. Kind of get kind of insular. I can feel, I guess, alone enough to work on something quietly, like not be like belting out lines, but just working on an idea. And I feel like I'm always very just kind of like balled up, tight, just kind of working on something really quietly so that I can hear it and just kind of getting in my own world a little bit. So I'm usually sitting.
I know that's a very specific question, but I'd be surprised the answers I get to that, how people have to be, they always have to walk around. So you, that's interesting though, because if I'm hearing you correctly, you're able to write with distractions, right? So if there's
Mhm.
people, I mean, that's really, I wish I could do that. I can't. I mean, I just, if I'm writing, I can't even read with with any noise around me. I wish I could, but you're able to really get inside your head that much, even if you're in a room with a bunch of people, um, you're still able to create.
Yeah, I think it's just I just have to be inspired and be excited about working on something. When I have a song that I'm working on and trying to finish, I'm very like it's all I really want to do. And it's honestly annoying to have to do anything else. But so yeah, I can totally zone out. It's I can't just do that on anything. Oftentimes I'm a very distracted person, really. But specifically with writing, if I'm like in the zone, I can just focus in and just do my thing for as long as I'm able to. Because it's just yeah, it's just about being really excited and really hyper focused on something.
So, from my experience as a writer, I realize when I'm writing, when I hit a wall, my instinct is never to push through. It's always that's kind of my brain telling me I've got to take a break. Um, whether it's an hour, whatever, and then come back to it. And I kind of know that, like, okay, this is just I'm not going anywhere. I'm just spinning my wheels. So, when you're working on something and on a song and that happens, are you more likely to push through, see it to the finish, or set it aside and go back to it with fresh eyes?
Um, it depends. I'll definitely try to push through. Like I think if I hit a wall, I'm likely gonna try to headbutt it for like an hour and a half. Um, and if it's just not working, I will then take a break. But I just try to I think if I'm trying to write an idea, say I'm trying to write a verse for a song that I already have a chorus for, and I'm like using this chord progression I like, I'm trying to get a melody, it's not working. I like to try to like really 180 it and try something very left field and see if it just breaks me out of like the ideas that I keep trying that just keep leading me nowhere. But if that kind of stuff doesn't work, I'll often take a break. And there are plenty of times where I've written songs that took 15 minutes to write, and then other songs took months to actually finish because I was finding myself just unable to find, that last piece that I'm happy with.
Now, when you say you do a 180, what do you mean by that?
I think, I mean, I'm very like driven by chords, like by playing guitar, having, chord progression or a riff or something. So sometimes, like I said, if there's like a chorus I really like, but I just can't find a verse that fits right. And I'm trying this progression and I keep trying it and trying different melodies and trying different, not just melodies, but lyrical, like kind of starting point ideas. And it's all just not turning out very well. I might completely change it and like start on like a minor chord or like do a different rhythmic thing and just kind of take my head out of the zone of what I was thinking. Cause I think you can get very trapped if you're thinking of this like idea and what you want something to be rather than letting it, happen naturally and become what it needs to be. And you can just get stuck in that like original idea that you're trying to stick to or trying to like make it work with this pre-chorus that you had or something that you just really want to make it work with rather than kind of just taking a step back and viewing it in a different way.
So did you deliberately, I think that's absolutely what I do. I mean, if again, I use that distance as a part of my process, taking that step back, I always find that coming back to something. So, I will give me those ideas or what kind of break, I'll get through that rut. But here's what I noticed about me. So if I finish something in the morning and I look at it later that same day, I'm still close to it. And too close. Like I feel like, no, I wrote it. Damn it. I'm not going to get rid of anything there. But if I finish something at night and wake up the next morning, I'm like a new person. It's crazy how I'm able to look at that thing with one night of sleep and how aggressive I can be with revision. Does that ever happen to you?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of times where I take not even just one night, but days, and then I'll revisit a song that I was trying to work on, and just try something totally new. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Usually, I find if I have an idea for a part of a song that is exciting enough to me, I'm gonna be able to find at least where that's supposed to lead um, fairly quickly, and then it's just about crafting whatever I want to say lyrically in a song. But I think definitely having like enough space can really help, and especially with with demoing, I think too. Like if you like you said, you finish something and you're really like wow, and you just like demo it really quick and you're excited about it. You can sometimes come back like the next day and be like, oh, this needs a lot of work. And I think that's kind of defeating if you demo something and you're like, this is actually just not as exciting as I thought it was going to be. I think it's best to always just wait until really know you have something finished and where you want it to be with that kind of stuff.
I had Mary Timony on the podcast a few months ago, and she said that I love this. She said that she writes in the morning and she does look at it later that same day because 12 hours later, she's a new person. So she views that person in the evening as a different person who is writing it in the morning because of what's happened during the day. And I whether that's true or not, but I love that idea that I'm going to look at this with fresh eyes because I'm not the same person. So it's almost like an additional editor. I just think that was such a great way to look at it, that's how she looks at distance.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of times too, I mean, if you take time from writing something, when you come back, sometimes it's not just that you have you know, that you've taken a breath and you've relaxed a bit, but sometimes it's that you have literally different inspirations going on in your life. Like, you could take 2 weeks from writing a song because you couldn't find anything and you're like listening to all different kinds of music. The weather is totally different. The like things going on in your life are totally different. And when you come back, you can have like a full fresh set of ideas. So I think that time can definitely give you a lot of that, like just clear headedness.
What about external factors? Things that you hear, you're in an airport, you're in a restaurant, you hear something, a line. Oh boy, that sounds like the line that might go in a song. How often does that happen to you?
I think usually with lyrics, I think you can hear lyrics and songs and be inspired in even a different way. Like you can hear one line that somebody has to say, and it can make you think about things a little differently, which is the beauty of writing. And I think that happens to me all the time, where I'll hear a lyric and I'll think about my life differently in a different lens, or just have like a different state of mind for a second because of what somebody's saying, kind of reaching out and making me think. Um, and I think sonically too, you could be listening to a bunch of pop music and writing songs, and it's like going to make you maybe lean into a little bit more of like a poppy style or just poppier melodies. And then 2 weeks later, you could be listening to something entirely different that just makes you think about song structure different. It's not even necessarily like chords or melodies. Sometimes it's like really structural, I think, where you just have like a new set of ideas because you're not thinking about something in this layout, like pop versus like indie rock or versus electronic. The way that songs are structured, there's can be so much difference, and that can inspire like different versions of ideas.
So I had Magdalena Bay on the podcast recently, and Mika told me that she has 2002 voice memos on her phone of ideas, and I'd never heard an amount that high. So is your phone just filled with voice memos of lyrical, melodic ideas? And how often do you go back to them? And is there any sense of organization if they're on
Um,
there?
there's definitely no organization. I don't have a ton. I do occasionally, if I'm really in the zone working on something and I have to go do stuff and I'm not gonna have time, I might just record myself playing that part a little bit so I can think about it. Um, but usually it's like I maybe listen to it once or twice and then never again. And it's like in my phone, it's like new recording some number. So yeah, I don't use it a ton, I wouldn't say.
So I want to talk about writer's block, or at least a rut. I'm not going to call it a block. So I talked to Anthony Doerr, the novelist, a few years ago, and he told me he doesn't believe in writer's block. He calls it a failure of courage. In other words, we can't be afraid to write badly, and that's the problem, is that no one is so good that they feel like, oh, I can't commit this to paper because it's not good enough. So that's always struck me that he called it a failure of courage, that if you're just afraid, if you're not afraid to write badly, you can write anything. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that. I mean, if there's anything, if you deal with that at all, and how you kind of break through.
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, I I think realistically the periods that I'm dealing with it are actually so short, but um I do agree. I mean, I think that the idea of writer's block or whatever is that you just can't write anything, but you can write stuff. I mean, when I'm experiencing it, I'm writing all the time. I just don't like it. Um, and I think that is feels very discouraging when you're doing that. It's frustrating. You're trying to write something that you're excited about and you keep hitting a wall. And it could be like 2 weeks that feels like it's been your entire life of not being able to do anything that you liked. But I think the best way that I have found in recent years to get out of whatever zone I'm thinking, I really love alternate tunings on the guitar. Um, as it completely takes away all of your knowledge of chords, basically. Having, changing all the strings, you can't just sit there and play chord progressions that you know how they're gonna sound. I think for me, if I'm sitting down with a guitar and standard just playing like chords, I know what chords are in the key and what would be logical to go to next. And I think that could be distracting sometimes. You just get stuck in playing the same stuff and kind of the same ideas. But if you like take all of that knowledge of your instrument away and it's just purely based on like trying to put your hands places on the guitar and seeing how it sounds and getting ideas from that and working around things that way, it can be really inspiring if you're like kind of feeling just like you have been doing the same thing for too long.
Yeah, I guess the equivalent to that as a writer would be, yeah, I think changing the environment. I mean, and short of going to another like type of device, and I do think that can be effective, like, maybe going from a phone to a computer, vice versa. But place tends to be, I guess, the equivalent to that. Um, but I guess that's a segue unintended into my next question, and that is, I am fascinated by the ritual of the process. I have certain types of times of day that I'm more effective, certain places I like to be when I'm more effective. So how important is that ritual to you? I mean, even though you might be able to write anywhere, Are there places where, whether it's a favorite room, certain chair, things you have to have with you, where you feel like, yeah, this is the most productive place?
Yeah, honestly, I think the only thing I need is a guitar, really. I could not write without having a guitar. I wouldn't That would make me really uncomfortable. Um, but I've done it. It's never been hard for me to do something as long as I can have a sense of, even if it's a false sense, but some kind of sense of privacy. I do a lot of songwriting just sitting in my bed or sitting on the couch in my house or in this room, in my like music room. Um, but really it's just I need that sense of like kind of it's just me and there's being able to drown the world out is all I really need. And I think when I'm really into something or focused on a song, it's much easier for me to do that. But I've had to do it in so many different places at this point. And I think the only thing that is ever constant is having a guitar.
Are you more of a morning person? Do you find that morning or night is more effective, or does that not matter?
I do both, honestly. I do both. I do it in the middle of the day. I do it, just kind of whenever. I am a morning person. I like having that quiet time in the morning. I'm not necessarily going to be writing when I'm having that time, but if I am inspired, I will go into it. But really, it's like it's impulsive a little bit. Like it's whenever I feel that need to go do it, I just want to go do it. Wherever that, whatever time of day that is, wherever that needs to be. And I want to work on something until I think I'm out of ideas for the moment. I don't like to like start working on a song and then be like, you know what, let's pick this back up tomorrow. I'm tired or something. I like to just kind of keep going until I feel like I don't have an idea for what to put in the next part and I've tried and it's just not really working.
I would love to know where you get that the ability to be able to write around distractions. I mean, I just it's I wish I had that, but how did you develop that? I mean, really, there's like, for example, there's not a study in the world that shows that writing, like prose writing, um, that listening to music while you're writing is effective because it literally involves the same part of the brain. And if you're trying to, be a prose writer and music playing, no matter what people think, it's not been shown to be effective. So I'd love to know how you developed that, what the secret is, because have you always been like that?
Yeah, I think so. Honestly, I mean, I think it's a little ADHD for sure. Like if I'm really interested in something, I'm super like focused on it. And I think music has always been that way. Like I'm constantly getting ideas, uh, and constantly, even just driving around thinking about everything around me and, how to describe that or how I would relate that or like a thought I have, how I would relate that to this other feeling and how I would connect that. So I'm kind of always ready to go if I have an idea musically that I'm excited about. I like just want to work on it. Like I just get really super honed in. And I think that's good because I can't even imagine what I would do if that weren't the case. Trying to travel all the time for work and just crank albums out because that's really what I like to do is the writing and recording part more than the playing live or touring or any of that stuff. I like that more, so I always want to work on it. Um, and it's the best feeling in the world, really, to be excited about something you're working on. It's unfortunately fleeting because you finish it and then you don't have anything to be excited about. But yeah, for me, it's just like if I'm in that, I really want to focus on it. I don't have to like try ever, I think, to write, really. I don't, I guess, like work at it in the sense of um, trying to push myself to write something specific or to go in a specific direction or do anything like that. It's just very like, I get excited about it and I want to make something that I'm happy with and proud of.
Um, I want to go back to the idea of initial inspiration, because one of the things that I hear from songwriters is they get ideas when they're engaged in something that doesn't require any conscious thought. So Agatha Christie said the best time to write a book is when you're doing the dishes. There's There was an article in the Washington Post last year about why we get our best ideas in the shower. It's because when our brains are engaged in an unconscious activity that requires no thought, that's when the unconscious ideas, can kind of come up, bubble up to the forefront. So I hear songwriters tell me they get ideas when they're gardening, folding laundry, cleaning, that ideas come to them not when they're thinking about the ideas, but during times when they're the exact opposite of that. So I'd love to explore that. How often does that happen to you? Have you ever thought about when those ideas come to you when you're engaged in an activity that requires no thought whatsoever?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I completely agree. I think that's mostly when I'm like stewing. I guess is like just driving. It's probably I get very distracted thinking about things while I'm driving. Um, but it just yeah, driving around, sitting in the pool, like just relaxing, like looking around at the world around me, I guess. That's definitely when I feel like I get so many thoughts that it's not necessarily like I'm like, oh, I gotta write that down to be a lyric, but it does I feel like it's like all of this pre-planning that you're accidentally doing all the time, and then you sit down and you start to write a song and ideas can just flow out of you. If you just get one start to like a lyric gonna kickstart everything. I mean, I've from that written songs where I just sat down and wrote something in like 10 or 15 minutes because it just really was all just coming so easily. And I think that's because it's recycled thoughts, basically, that your brain has connected in certain ways. Like, you could be thinking about this thing that happened between you and a friend, and that also reminds you of like this other thing that's happened in your life, or it could remind you of, like a metaphor for something else. Um, and I think it's just you have to be kind of in that headspace all the time, getting these ideas to have these opinions and these thoughts that are kind of preformed so that writing the song that you want to say something very particular and very complex isn't this huge labor of trying to figure out exactly what you're trying to say.
Do you need distance to be able to write about something, or are you more effective writing about that thing immediately after it happens?
I think it depends on the type of song, really. I think there's a lot of times where there's so much self-reflection with my writing, at least, where it's looking back on things and saying, what could I have done differently? How did that affect me? How did this thing in my life connect to this other thing in my life and I didn't even realize it? So that obviously it requires distance and time, and then it usually for me requires a of the moment inspiration to be thinking about this kind of thing. Um, but you need that like kind of backing of all of this time that you've spent and how you view it differently, I guess. But then there's other times where I'm writing a song and it feels like, just completely like open heart, spilling it out, like this thing that you're feeling right now without any thought of whether you are over romanticizing something or just being too intense about something or making it something it's not. So I think it really just depends on the type of song and like the headspace.
I've got a quote here exactly. You probably would like this by the writer Anais Nin. She says, "We write to taste life twice, in the moment and then in retrospect." And I think that's kind of what you're saying is that when you're writing, and Flannery O'Connor said, "I write to discover what I know." So writing is the act of discovery, not just about putting thoughts on paper. I kind of think that's what you just told me, but
Yeah, for sure. I think it's that, and it's also for me writing is very much I think I have a very scattered brain. I'm always just chaotic in there. And I think I'm a very over analytical person when I like have opinions. It takes like I want to really make sure I know what I think about something and kind of consider everything and have like an opinion that I'm gonna agree with that isn't fleeting. And I think writing songs is a great way to like work through all of your thoughts and put this concrete thing down on paper. Like that you can just, it's like this expression of your exactly how you feel, and you no longer have to, I guess, battle with yourself to try to argue back and forth, advocate these opinions, because you've decided how you feel and you've put it down. I saw actually Fiona Apple once said something in an interview talking about how she used to write letters when she was angry and then read them to like her parents and stuff. And that's really what I feel like it's like a lot of the time. I think it's you want to get all of these thoughts and opinions, just like when you're arguing with someone, or you're upset about something, you keep like going over the same thing a little bit. You keep coming back to the same places and the same thoughts and getting frustrated by the same thing. And I think it's a way to let go of some of that a little bit and just decide your opinion and your thoughts on something and write them all down and like catalog them. And that's it. That was all of it. It's all sitting right there and it's done.
I love that. It's the difference between I'm going to write something to tell people how I feel, or I'm going to write something to figure out how I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love that. That's great. Last question. Let's talk books. I do find that songwriters are, for the most part, voracious readers. So Sophie, don't let me down. So do you like to read? If you do, are you a genre person, author person? Let's talk about books.
I do like to read. I wouldn't say I'm a aggressive reader. I actually would have not read a book at all until a couple years ago. Like I think right around quarantine, I started reading again. And I was the type of person, like I was trying to do an English degree in college and I didn't read a single book. I just didn't, I had trouble focusing on it. It was always the thing. And I don't like being told what I have to read, I guess, either. I like to read something because it's what I, in the moment, am feeling and connecting with. I don't like being told to read something on any kind of schedule. But I do like reading now. I have gotten back into it a little bit, and I think personally, it's nice to always have like a book going, even if you're not like devouring it. It's just nice to have something to read and kind of take your mind out of things. It's peaceful. The last book I read was Rebecca, which was amazing. That was great. Um, right now I've just been reading Martian Chronicles again. I read a lot of sci-fi. I think it's kind of my favorite, probably. Um, but I love sci-fi, and I also just like a lot of like romantic type of writing. To be honest, like doesn't have to be actual romance, but just like that style of writing is a lot of times what I go to, either that or like horror and sci-fi.
So is that a diversion from songwriting or an inspiration or both?
Both, both, I think. It's a whole world to dive into. Really, when you read a good book, it's like and especially sci-fi in particular, is like the literal world that you have to dive into. Um, so it can be a break, but I think it also inspires me a lot. I think especially when I read like romantic era, like writing style, I think it's so inspiring. All of the like connection with like nature and like looking around at the world and seeing like the beauty is oftentimes so inspiring. And it's something that I look for when I'm writing too. It often is like looking at things around me that are beautiful or bittersweet or, can just be connected to these emotions that I'm feeling.
And that's it for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget my book, Desolation, a heavy metal memoir by Mark Morton with Ben Opapari, that is me, comes out June 25th on Hachette Books. Mark is a good friend of mine. He is one of the guitarists in the band Lamb of God, and this is his memoir. It's a damn good book, if I do say so myself. But again, that book is out June 25th on Hachette Books. You can pre-order it now everywhere, your favorite online bookstore. So be sure to do that. The site, Songwriters on Podcast, contains all of the archived episodes of the podcast. Of course, you can find them on all streaming platforms as well, but they're also on the site. I only have had the podcast for about I don't think even 2 years. Before that, all of the interviews were transcribed, and that took a lot of work. And that's why I started the podcast. So if you want to read the interviews that I did before the podcast, they are on Songwriters on Podcast as well. There are about 200 of them going back to 2010. So check those out. If you want to get a hold of me, Ben at songwritersonprocess.com, or fill out a form on the website. I'm here for your questions, your complaints, your concerns, or your interview suggestions. I'd love getting those as well. So hit me up. I will try to respond. So that's it, everyone. Have a great day and see you next time.